and then we'll get into the intros. Okay, there we go. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to Highlight Conversations. It's great to have you all back here again. If you haven't been before, what Highlight Conversations is all about is our opportunity to share a little bit about our background, how we got to where we are, the highs, the lows, some of the challenges that we've experienced along the way, and how we've dealt with them. My name is Maxine Tate from the Highlight Pro Skydiving team. I am joined today by two of my teammates, our interviewee for today, Miss Allison Reay.
Hi.
And and then we have the magic behind the curtain, my sister from another mister, Melissa Nelson.
Hey, everybody.
And we're excited to get started today. So before we get into having the chat with Allison, one of the goals of Highlight Conversation is to encourage you to ask the questions that you want to hear answered by whoever it is that we have in the hot seat, as we have Allison today, and to show you a little bit of how you can get involved and to show you around the chat room. I'm going to ask Melissa to give you the lowdown on how to get involved during the hour. Melissa.
Awesome. Thanks, Maxine. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here. Just so everyone can be familiar of what we are doing here and where you'd like to go to ask your questions. If you guys can navigate where the chat is, if you're on a desktop, it's usually at the bottom. Just scroll your mouse down. Don't really remember where it is on the phone, so you might have to turn your phone horizontally to see that. But if you can find the chat, go to the everyone, and if everyone could just pop in where you are calling from or your home DZ, just so we can see everybody who's on the call and that everybody knows where the chat is. And if you have a question for Maxine, what we'll have you do is, if you're in the chat box, if you go over where it says everyone, there's a little arrow. That arrow will pop down to everybody's name. If you just select Maxine's name there, that message will go straight to her. And those are where you will put your questions. So if you have questions now, you can start popping them in there right now. And Maxine, that's all from me.
And so what we're going to do is myself and Allison are going to have a quick sort of 10-15 minute conversation. And then we're going to open it up to everybody to ask those questions. When I do ask, if I see a question I want to put in there, I'm just going to mention your name and invite you into the conversation. That will be the time for you to unmute yourself and to get involved in the conversation. And once we move on to the next conversation, if you'd be kind enough just to mute yourself again so we don't have any background noise, that would be awesome. So Miss Allison Reay, Allison is, I've got to read out, this is such a badass intro. Allison Reay is a pint-sized powerhouse of a swooper. That is a mouthful. At the age of 35, she has already spent half of her life in the skydiving world. Starting from the age of 17, she has worked her way across the packing mat, up into the tandem video room, and then all the way to the engineering department of performance designs, where she is project lead for the Peregrine and the Valkyrie, and she is now developing the canopies she loves to fly. Along the way, she has not only swooped the gates as a competitive canopy pilot, but she has also swooped into the Mile High Stadium as part of the Denver Broncos Thunderstorm demo team. Allison has forged a professional career in skydiving fueled with passion, commitment, and with an unwavering and unapologetic drive to get to where she wants to be. She is full send on and off the swoop pond. Full send, I love that. Allison Reay, welcome to Highlight Conversations.
Hi, thank you.
So in the 10-15 minutes that we're going to have a little chat starting off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your origin story. I know a little bit, obviously, because we're teammates and friends, but it's part of the story that not a lot of people hear about. And I'm fascinated by anyone who discovers the sport of skydiving at such an early age, at 17, and already knows that's where you want to spend your life. I'm amazed by anyone who can be so full send at such an early age. So I'd love for you to share with the rest of us a little bit about those origin stories.
Okay, all right. So basically, I just saw skydiving on the news when I was a kid, like maybe like 12 or 13. And I just got obsessed with it, and I was like Googling it. Well, I'm sure there wasn't a Google back then, like Ask Jeevesing it or something. And, you know, I was just like researching it, and my parents were pretty supportive, and they took me to a drop zone, and I just was like watching skydiving. And that was like on a family vacation, and we just went and saw the skydivers. And so then when I was 17, I called like a small drop zone in Colorado and asked them if I could skydive. and they said, no, you have to be 18, but if you have an ID that says that you're 18, we'll believe you. And so I got a fake ID, and just to skydive, I was just I went and I loved it. I did my tandem, and then as soon as I graduated high school, I started AFF pretty much like the month after I graduated high school.
Wow. You're not the first person I've heard to say they fake their ID for skydiving. It's a pretty healthy reason to get a fake ID. And so what happened after that?
So then I started AFF, and I needed a way to pay for AFF. I had no money. I was 17. And so the DZO from that drop zone taught me how to pack. And then I got through AFF and through my A license with packing, and I was terrible at it. I hated it. I really had no formal training. I was just like stuffing stuff in the containers and getting people on planes. So I definitely packed some malfunctions that first year, but I just kept packing, and I paid off my AFF, and I just was getting some jumps. I was enough to pay for some coaching, got my B license and my coach rating, and I wasn't doing like a lot of coaching, but here and there, and still packing. And then I packed enough to get a video camera set up, and I started shooting video at about 200 jumps, which, this was kind of a small little sketchiest drop zone in the middle of nowhere. It's definitely not like the recommended progression, but like it kept me in the air, and I was really like very lucky to have that place, because I don't know how I would have afforded it or been able to skydive without it.
Were you there full time after school when you were doing this, or were you hustling a job at the same time off the drop zone?
No, I was, well, for that summer, right after high school, I just moved to the drop zone. I was like sleeping in the packing hangar with other packers. I was
Wow.
in the packing hangar, yeah. And then I got like a job, and while I was shooting video, and once I was shooting video, I was able to like have a little bit of money to like get in a little apartment, and I started school. The year after that, I started college, so I was like going to college and shooting video, but man, I was so broke during that time. I was paying for books and a little bit of fuel to get to school, and had a little apartment, but I had no money. But I was happy. I mean, I was jumping, and that's really like I was pretty focused, and I was getting an education and feeding myself, so it wasn't so bad. But I was definitely had no money.
What were you, when you went to college, what were you studying? At that point, did you know you wanted to stay in skydiving, or was that something you had pressure to do, or you're like, I've got to have a plan B, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it was a plan B thing. I just really was like, man, I wanted to go to school, I liked school. I was always like interested in high school, and I liked college a lot, and I wanted an education. I wanted to know I was doing something, but I always planned on skydiving for sure. So I got a degree in technical communications because it was cheap and got me a degree. And
I'm not even sure I know what that means, technical communications.
And technical writing, it was technical writing and technical communications. So technically doing Zoom calls and things like that, which I'm terrible at.
Damn, well, I mean, you should be in my seat right now then.
I know. I wouldn't do well.
Okay, so you're at college, you're hustling, trying to make it work. You finish your degree, you get the degree, then what?
Yeah, so then I got a job at Mile High. I got a job at Mile High in 2010. And so that was awesome because I was finally making some real money. I was like, and I got an AFF rating and a rigging ticket then at that point. And so I was like, I was getting some actual money, and I was jumping my face off, which was great. But it was a lot of work then too, because I would get like 12 to 15 jumps, and then I was like getting off of work and maybe doing a repack, or like on my days off getting some doing line sets or things like that, and so it was definitely a lot of work, but I paid off my student loans that year. Wow. And then I was starting base jumping, and I eventually got fired from the rigging loft, Monty Medina, who was the manager there, and my rigging mentor fired me that like about a year after, because not because of my rigging or anything, just because I just wasn't keeping up with the workload, and I had started base jumping, so I was like on my way to a base jump, and he called and he was like, uh you have another pack job that's like a couple days late, like, are you sure you want to keep up with this? And I was like, not really. But by then I was making enough jumping that I was actually doing okay.
So do you think it's true to say, like, people who are trying to make a living in skydiving, I always feel like you've got to have your finger in a lot of pies, that expression, just to make sure that you can cover it. But it sounded like you had your finger in too many pies.
By that time, probably, yeah, for sure. But yeah, but again, like, it was a really cool opportunity for me, so I don't regret it, and I got a lot of rigging knowledge, which has really helped me in my current job, for sure.
Right. So okay, so we're going to come back to base jumping later for sure, but let's just keep going with your progression from basically working at Mile High and then eventually ending up in DeLand in working for Performance Designs. And to me, I'm super interested in how you've done that, because you've ended up with this very technical job, although now that I hear you did technical communications, maybe that's a help, but it seems like that's a massive jump. So how did that happen for you?
So so basically, once I got to Mile High, that was also like the first time I got any real formal canopy training, and that was from Jimmy Tranter, who, that guy is my hero. He helped me so much, and he was just so enthusiastic about parachutes. And we had I had a lot of bad habits that he took some patience with me, and really helped me like get back into swooping, or get to actually really swooping. And so then I started competing in 2012, and I love the competition swoop scene. And then 2013 is when I got I got asked to try out for the Broncos team, and I made that. And then so I was doing that for a few years, and then in 2015 I was just fully immersed in parachutes by then. That's all I wanted to do, and I was like, every time I was in free fall, I just wanted to be under a parachute, and I was really interested in them, and I had done some physics classes and stuff like that in college, and I liked that side of it as well. And so basically, I kind of just decided I wanted to be a test jumper without really understanding what it really entailed, or what it meant. So I was at a swoop comp, and I told Greg Wimmeler that I wanted to be a test jumper because I knew he had some background in it, and he was like, "You don't want to be a test jumper." And I was like, "No, I do. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be a test jumper." And he was like, "All right, move to DeLand then." And so I kind of just went on a mission to get to DeLand somehow, because that's where test jumping was happening. And then there was a job opening at Performance Designs in the demo, as a demo coordinator, and I took that job. And then about a year later, I moved over to the engineering department.
So did you have the job in PD before you moved, at least as a demo coordinator? Is that that was your, I don't know, your way in, as it were?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I didn't say that in the job interview, but I was definitely just wanted to be a test jumper, but they probably knew.
But that's an interesting point to make, is that you didn't necessarily have the door opening to the department which you wanted to, but you're just like, I don't care, I'm just gonna get in the door, and then I'm gonna hustle,
Yeah, they said that test jumping was happening in DeLand, so I would have probably taken most jobs in DeLand, but the PD job was it was awesome. I was like, that's gonna be my in.
Making a big move like that, or every time I hear a story about someone who's made a big move like that, you're just again, very full send. Do you ever have any pause for well, what happens if I don't manage to get that job, or any moments of, I don't want to say self-doubt perhaps, but just not just gung-ho about it? Any moments like that?
Absolutely. It was complete self-doubt. As I was leaving, I'm like, I'm gonna give this a shot, and hopefully, like, I don't see you guys in 6 months, but like, I might just be right back to this job. You know, I did, and I loved Mile High, so there was like no qualms with like if this doesn't work out, like I'll be right back here. You know, so at least I had a cool like opportunity there, and I had no reason to leave there. You know, it was just I just really wanted this test jumping. I really like had it in my mind that I wanted to be a test jumper.
I love that in a way, because it's like, if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. You just come
Yeah.
back and continue what you're doing, and then find the next door to walk through. But you have to almost make the opportunities happen for you, and not be afraid if they don't work out. And if they do, fantastic. But you know, it's like you make your own future, as it were.
That's what it felt like very much at the time. It was like, and for sure I like believed that this was going to happen, or I wouldn't have gone for it. But I also always I definitely was like, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. I moved across the country alone, and I was definitely like, we'll see. Like, and it worked out.
Did you even have anywhere to stay when you got here? Was it literally, I'm just packing my stuff in a car and I'm on my way?
I moved into this like older lady's mother-in-law suite, like that she just had it on Craigslist, and I just moved in there. So I had a place to stay when I got here. I had no idea what it was gonna be like when I showed up, but my brother came and he helped me move in, so it wasn't like I was showing up
Awesome.
like alone. But
okay, so here's what I want to ask them, because this is the bit that always fascinates me. Demo coordinator to engineering. Like, I mean, no, it doesn't matter that it's the demo coordinator, but how do you get your foot in the door at engineering when you don't have an engineering background?
I don't know. I don't know. I just talked about parachutes a lot, and I had 10,000 skydives, you know, by the time I moved here, or maybe 9,000 skydives, you know, something in there. And so I had a lot of jumps, and I talked about parachutes nonstop all the time, and I kind of knew quite a bit of the physics behind it. Well, at least I thought I did. But and so I just would be like, I just told people in engineering, like, you guys like probably want to hire me up there.
I love that. Like, how else are you going to get your foot in the door? It's like, you need me, and what you don't know, you don't know. So you just bring all the confidence, and then you learn when you're there, right?
It's most of this has been like learning on the fly for sure, and also like being super stubborn and probably like a little dumb, but having some grit, maybe, hopefully.
Yep, for sure. And that's just a strong message in your origin story. I think, as far as I'm concerned, is that you pick up something at 17. You're like, I want to do it. You find a way, even if you don't have the standard qualifications. You're just like, I'm going to learn. I'm here, and I just, you know, I want to get into it. So I love that part of your story for sure.
It probably was not the easiest journey or the best way to do this, but I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm happy it's sorted out. I'm grateful.
Yeah, cool. I see Holly's just put up a question there, so let's bring in the question from Holly, and then I've got some follow-up questions after hers here. So Holly, hi love.
I'm sorry, I've just been giggling a lot. This has been great. Cool. So I was going to ask you what your favorite four-way team is, but that's not the question I have for you. Instead, I just wanted to ask, I was really impressed. You had an injury recently, and I think you were out for 6 months. Was that right?
Yeah.
And I was really impressed with how you dealt with it, how you stayed around the sport. You know, I saw you going to highlight demos, but being like on the ground, and I saw you doing canopy courses on the ground and staying around the sport. And I guess I was quite impressed by your motivation and enthusiasm, because even when I've had small periods of feeling a little like ear infections or not being able to jump or something, really easy for the blues to set in. So I was just super impressed with how you came back almost more enthusiastic, and I was just kind of wondering how you did that.
I'm glad it looked like that to you. I feel like it was, what a nightmare. I tell people, like, be careful under canopy. I've always said that, like, don't take an injury because like even because the slow progression is still faster than like a small injury, you know. But I was definitely dying, but it was also like this skydiving is my life, and like I I really wanted to make sure that when I came back, that it came back with like to like have all of those things where it's like maybe I've been a little burnout in this area or this area, like make sure you get that passion back when you come back. And it just made try to remember like what it feels like to be down, and use that as like motivation to just be in the air more. Because and it wasn't hard, because that part of it wasn't hard, because it really was like it was tough to be down. And so coming back has been like it feels so good to just be back in the air and everything, back like doing everything. But also like these are my friends and my family, so like not hang out with them.
I think one of the things we always say is, as swoopers, especially competitors, is we're always one injury away from retirement. And I say that just because it's so devastating when you do hurt yourself, to be able to come back. But it's only a small moment in time, right? Like 6 months in a lifetime of living is a very small moment. And understanding the relativity of time in any injury is an important one.
Yeah, I think actually you and I talked about that. I called you a few days before my surgery just about like advice and ways to handle it. And I think you said that like in the end it's gonna feel like it's a blip in time, but yeah. And now it does, for sure. Now it's like, you know, but if during the whole process you just got to remember like it's gonna be over and you're gonna be back in the air as long as you work hard.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because this leads into the concept or the conversation surrounding risk. You know, what we do as swoopers or anyone flying high performance parachutes specifically is a much higher risk level than your normal average skydive, for sure. Have you ever thought about that when you got into pro swooping, or does it ever give you pause for thought now, especially having had a major injury?
So, especially after having a major injury, I have not been back on a pond yet. My next swoop comp will be next month, in Sebastian, and right now I'm just feeling stoked. But I do have that thought in my head, that little like, you know, is there going to be like any reservation? I think it's like I don't think there will be, but you know, it's those mental games are always hard to play.
Let me ask you about, because you've been back in the air, right? So since the injury. So let me ask you, like, how was your first jump back? And the reason why I think this is so interesting, especially with someone with your experience level, is I feel like everybody goes through the same nerves. It doesn't matter whether you've got 50 jumps in the injury or whether you've got 5,000 or 10,000. How did the first jump back feel for you?
So I mean, I jumped like a larger canopy, and I just tried to take it super easy, and I really did like I probably jumped about maybe a month and a half before I really should have been like jumping. So I just tried to take it super easy on like 120s, just straight in landings. Like, so I feel like that side of it wasn't as nerve wracking. But then once I got onto like my personal parachutes or started adding any weight, that's when I like got those little like those like be careful, or I was like sliding in a lot of landings and things like that. But I mean, it comes back quick. You just gotta respect the progression like anything.
Yeah, and I mean, in talking further about risk, I mean, you mentioned base jumping, I mean, which is probably, we could argue, with the exception of proximity wingsuit flying, one of the highest risk quotients of anything you can do under a wing, for sure. Tell us a little bit about you getting into base jumping, and specifically maybe around the mindset you have when you go to make a base jump, because it's all or nothing, right?
Right. I mean, it is all or nothing. I mean, I guess it is, you're right. It is all or nothing. But the way I feel, I really think that like as far as like comp swooping, demos, test jumping and base jumping, like all for me like pretty much overlap as far as like the mental game, or the mental like status of that. They're all pretty unforgiving. You have to know, like you have to be confident, you have to know that you are confident in your ability. You have to have your plan set in your head, and then you have to like shut all that off and perform. And base can be very, I mean, it's risky, like no doubt, but I mean, it's no more like in some ways I think demos can also be high, like, you know, they can also have their risk factor, especially because it's not just you that you're worried about. You know, you have your team, you have the spectators, you have the sport as a whole to think about, and so that's also very high profile, high risk. And I think there's just as much pressure on a high profile demo as there is on a base jump in some ways. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like, I think all those things are like pretty intertwined as far as like the mental game of it.
And so, yeah, no, it does. It absolutely makes sense. It's in a similar mindset. I can appreciate that. But we'll come back to demos in a minute. Let's just get a little bit more into the base jumping. How did you get started? And I know you do a lot of base jumping. And what are you seeing out there for a lot of the folks, for example, who are getting into skydiving, wanting to base jump? Or what should they be a little bit more cautious about there? Because we don't know what we don't know, right?
Right. I think mostly like half of base jumping is canopy piloting skills, and they're different canopy piloting skills than if you're wanting to get into swooping. So if that's what you're trying to get into, I think you just focus on more base jumping style canopy piloting in your progression. Because other than that, like, then it's just about like I said, respecting the progression, getting a good instructor, getting the knowledge. Gear knowledge is huge. You want to be able to trust your gear and not have any gear fear on the exit point. And then just make sure that you're switched on when you go for base jumps.
And it's interesting to me because watching base jumping now, very much like canopy pilots, I'm glad to say there's a lot more clear progression for people, as in there's actually base schools out there. There's places you can sign up and go get education, which probably, I'm going to guess, may or may not have existed when you started base jumping, which I know is quite a while ago. How did you get into it, given that there wasn't as much structure in the sport at the time?
Yeah, I got a mentor, and I find that a viable way of learning how to base jump. The schools are great, and there's definitely like super reputable schools. I think having a mentor is also a decent option. But just making sure that you're like getting the education one way or another, somebody you trust, somebody that's reputable, and just know that no matter what, like, base is a high risk sport, and injuries aren't necessarily unlikely. And now there's so many tools for people out there that like spots and ways of like mitigating your risks as much as possible.
Who was your mentor?
A guy named Rich Cervantes. A boy.
Have you ever mentored someone?
Yeah.
What's that experience like?
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty exciting for me to be able to teach anything that I love, you know, like it's in a similar sense of canopy piloting, something that's like, it might be pretty scary for people, and you get to really like talk them through something that is kind of complex and probably pretty scary for them, and try to like get them to understand difficult concepts that like are pretty important. And that's super challenging. I find canopy piloting coaching also like challenging. And like, you know, but it can be hard.
Yeah, well, any kind of, at the end of the day, we're all adults, and adults have already formed their ways of learning. And so trying to coach or work with another adult when they're very, you know, they have a certain way of hearing things, you have to really find how they're going to best react to information. And that's challenging in itself, just in terms of the communication. Then on top of that, of course, you've got just the mental game of watching someone fly a parachute, whether it's off a base point or just, you know, in a normal pattern, because ultimately you can give them all the information, but they're still the ones that are at the controls.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not like AFF where you can pull for them.
Exactly, for sure. Any base stories you want to? I'm looking for a base story, I guess, where you may have found yourself having to make a decision based on the risk at the time. So, for example, maybe you could share a couple of times when you've decided not to jump and why.
Well, first of all, base is, yeah, one thing I want to say is base is like the coolest sport in the world, and it's given me so many memories and so many good times, but it's also kind of a silly sport where it's pretty selfish and it's very distracting. Like, I think I'd probably be better at swooping and probably farther in my career if I didn't like spend a bunch of time base jumping for 6 years. But I did end up learning a lot. And so as far as like a specific story, I mean, part of base jumping, it's like part of swooping is bailing out of your swoop. Like, part of base jumping is just being able to climb down off an exit, even if your friends go. And I think like I remember I was like maybe 23 or something, and it was night and it was dark. It was super dark, and it was a super safe, like, okay, it was a reasonably safe base jump, because we had a nice tailwind, easy, like, it was a freestanding antenna, but it was so dark and I was just so scared. And I climbed down, and I knew there was like no reason for me to be climbing down, but it was just that mental like side. I just couldn't get through it, and I cried on the bottom. And then I was like, and my friends were like, you can't cry. Like, you gotta be confident with your decision to climb down, or like you're not doing it right, you know? So I remember that.
You were crying because you wish you'd gone, or because you were just disappointed in yourself, or what do you mean?
Yeah, because everybody else went, and I knew that the decision to jump was like pretty reasonable decision to make, but like, I was just too scared to go, and then they all had fun and I didn't, and but they were super encouraging, and it was a pretty good lesson in base.
Yeah. And so for the folks coming in, because I talk to people regularly now that are saying they're coming into skydiving because they want to start base jumping. What does that look like for the modern wannabe base jumper, rather than going through the mentor program now?
I think I don't know. I'm a couple years, like, I'm not on current, like a couple years on current, but I haven't taught in a few years, and I haven't like, and I know there's so many different courses out there that I think it's just like find a reputable course, like, and make sure you get good advice from like people that you trust.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm necessarily the best person to give that current like student coaching to.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So let's talk, because you mentioned, there's the risk quotient, or the concept of risk, and then the way that you mentally deal with that is similar between, whether it's base jumping or demos. And then demos, you talked about the idea that you're working as a team and there's a lot of other people around. And goodness, I feel like over the last week or two, there's been so many videos of people jumping into stadiums where it really hasn't ended up well. I mean, I think you have to not be on social media to have seen a lot of that coming up. So I want to just talk a little bit about the risk involved in demos, and specifically, maybe you could start off by just telling us what some of the factors are of just jumping into a stadium, so the folks that maybe haven't done that before can appreciate what some of the factors are that we have to deal with.
Okay. I mean, so the factors are like the objects around the stadium, and then winds, and then people and the other people that you're jumping with. Because, you need to be able to come in separately, but still make a good show. So you don't want to get stacked too much. Then you have stuff like clouds and all of those, and the aircraft, and the spot, and is that it? Am I missing any?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's so much, isn't it? It's so funny because people think landing in a stadium is just like an accuracy shot, and it's not, because there's no such thing as a straightforward demo ever.
Yeah, and I mean, an open stadium in great winds with where there's no thermals happening, and you don't have wires or any of those, I guess could be an easy jump, but it never works like that. There's always something's gonna come up. You're gonna make a fly decision. Almost, I'd say 75% of demos, something's gonna change, and you're as a team, you gotta make a fly decision on like we got to flip this plane around and get a different spot or like something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a demo. I'll just quickly share this one recently in North Carolina, jumping into one of the women's soccer matches there. And it's a relatively open stadium, so it's not closed in or what have you. So it looked like it'd be very straightforward, but we had really strong winds, like 25 knots possibly, and 20 knots all the way down to about 200 feet. And then it died to nothing. And then you had rotors going the other way. So it's a question of when do you actually turn into the stadium? Can you make it back into the stadium? But then you don't want to overshoot. And it's what looks like a very, very straightforward demo ends up being incredibly difficult to make the decision on the fly and make sure that you get back in over the people, not low, and still manage to put it right on target. So that looked like it was going to be super straightforward, but it wasn't. And I know specifically, Allison, for the Denver Broncos Thunderstorm jumping into Mile High Stadium, I think it's known as one of the most technical stadium jumps that there is out there. And perhaps you just want to describe to us why, what the challenges are specifically about that jump, and we'll talk a little bit about the Denver Broncos Thunderstorm team.
Cool. So the biggest challenge with the Broncos Stadium jumps is that we have wires up. So the wires basically cross over the top of the stadium, and then they bring the camera down to one side. So we have like basically like one corner of the stadium where we have to dive through the wires. So we end up making a turn over those wires. So we're swooping, but by necessity. And we have to turn over one wire and then get underneath the other. So it's really just one turn. It's kind of like swooping the gates in a certain way, but with 70,000 people watching, you know, and so that's the biggest challenge. And then with that, like it would be like night when we'd have pyro or other camera crews around. So all of those always had were a factor also, just like, especially if it was a big game, then like there would always want to be like NFL camera crews, NBC, whatever camera crews on the plane and stuff. So it would just get heady pretty quick sometimes. But like I said, like I have well over 100 jumps into that stadium, and it's doing the same turn every time, but it probably took about like 4 years or more before it was like, okay, I think I've encountered every challenge that there can be, you know, like I think now like it started to like kind of calm down.
And the bottom line is like you're trying to shoot an invisible space because you can't see cables, right? So
correct.
That's pretty tricky.
Right. So we would just go based on visual cues. Like, so we knew that we needed to be flying over the goal, basically the goalpost, and that's what it's called, right? Football, yeah.
Sure.
We'd be flying over the goalpost, and so you'd make your turn over a certain spot, and then we knew that if we made this degree, like it was like 180 degree, it was somewhere between like 120 to like 220, somewhere in there, you know, like it's this much degree of a turn at this range of altitude, you know. And then if you were looking at the 10-yard line or back, then you knew you were good as long as you came out at the like towards the ground. Like, you know, you couldn't come out high or low.
That's why it's the most technical one in the business, for sure.
Yeah. But I didn't have to learn that, you know. I got taught how to do it, which was really cool, because I got taught by Justin Thornton and Stu Schoenfeld and Jimmy Trainer how to do that turn. But I can't imagine being those guys and like looking up and being like, I think like if we get through those wires, if we can like dive down here, we should be fine. But by the time I was on the team, they kind of already knew how to do it, so I just got taught how to do the turn.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's another full send attitude. This is the process. Trust the process. Do the turn, and then hopefully it works. Kind of. How many jumps did you end up doing into the stadium?
I don't know a total number, but it's definitely over 100 because, and that's including practice jumps into there.
Right,
And
right.
like, so when I first joined the team, we would do a couple days here and there of just practicing. And then we always did a practice jump anytime there was wires up. We had to do a practice jump for the cable cam agreements.
Which is great because ultimately for a demo, you don't normally get any practice jumps at all. It's you get a site visit if you're lucky. We do it with Highlight, but that's not always the case with other demos, and it's a one and done. How did they work out? Did they always work out well for you?
Yeah, for the most part. There was definitely my first year. They hadn't let me go into any of the cable cam games yet. I was still practicing the same turn, and like we would still do the turn into the stadium just because we kept it consistent. We always did the same turn, but I hadn't done any ones with actual wires up. So my first wire game, it was a championship game, so it was full stadium, and we had about 15 knot wind or 50 mile an hour winds when I exited, which was like right at our limits. We wouldn't go much above 18, and so as soon as we got out, it gusted to like 21, and I just didn't set up for it very well. And once it's like that strong, you kind of have to back up into your setup point a little bit, or at least do like a slight like crab under your setup point. And so I just didn't like quite make it there. So I can't do a 90 because there's a wire there. Like, so I just like, and I obviously can't go straight. So I just kind of like got to where I like thought I could see the wire, and I just busted a quick 90 and ended up just stabbing and like hitting my knees, and I saved it. I mean, kind of, but now I'm like on the wrong side of the stadium from everybody else. Like, they're all like landed over there, and I landed completely on the opposite side of the stadium. And my boss was like right on the sideline, like where we would meet. And he just like walked out to the stadium, and he was like, "Hey, like nobody knows. Just smile and wave. You're good. Like, are you all right?" And so it worked out. So, and then all the rest of them, everything else was fine.
How did it feel? Can you remember what you felt mentally the first time you made that jump with the cables? You said it was a championship game. Those are the big moments, right? They're really big moments. How do you deal with it? How do you handle that?
I think I was fine until like I was pretty nervous for sure. I was always those first couple years on the team I was pretty nervous. Like even the summer before, like when I'd pass by the stadium, I'd kind of get like my stomach in knots a little bit. I'd be like, "Ooh, football season's coming." But definitely for that one I was absolutely nervous. And then they said it was gusting, and so like it was like really cold because it's January and December, and I was really like, that was one of the times where it was like very tricky to like turn it off, and might have been what like affected some of my performance on the jump as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's normally a culmination of things together, right? That's where that really sends the nerves going, or even the performance, I think. Yeah. Goodness. Well, very exciting. I've certainly watched a bunch of the Broncos Thunderstorm jumps, and they're mind-blowing. Do you ever feel any of the nerves when you're doing other demos, like something less technical? Like how do you approach a jump where it's like a one and done?
I'm definitely never not nervous. Like, there's never no pre-jump nerves for demos, right? Like, do we ever jump when we're like, oh, this is no big deal? And I think if you are feeling like that, you're probably not putting all the thought into it that you should be, because there really is always going to be a lot to think about. And it's, like I said, it's a responsibility to the sport, I think, to perform well on demos. We're representing our sport to the public, so it's not just on us, it's on everybody, and so there should be some nerves so I think, but usually it does depend mostly on the landing area and what the weather's doing.
So okay, that's awesome. Let's move away from the demos a little bit. We've got a question from someone who's, I don't think they're on here, but it's come in on the call from Alina, who wants to know a little bit more about, firstly, what first canopy did you own? So I guess what was, maybe not your student canopy, but where did you start out from that was your first big purchase?
My first big purchase was a Sabre 150, but that was a terrible mistake. I was so bad at it. I was so bad at flying it, and so I went, and that's actually the first time I met Amy. I was like 18, had like gotten a rig, that I got from I got that money mostly, like my parents helped me a little bit, but mostly I like sold my my like bicycle, and that was back when you could afford gear a little bit easier, and also my any money I got from graduation. And so I bought this Canopy because it was used and it was on the market and I needed a rig, and and it's just what I had. And so then I really needed coaching. So somebody was like, "I'm going to Eloy, and you can catch a ride with me if you want to come." And then they were like, "There's this Canopy coach," and that was Jason. And then I met Amy, and I went on, like, I got a couple free fly jump coaching from her, but she doesn't ever remember me.
And Alina, I think, why don't you hop on? I know you've got a follow-up question about high performance. Why don't you ask that one directly? Now I see you there.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, Alina.
When Allison had her injury and was off jumping, I took a Canopy course from her. And I know you felt like you hit your, the low part of your recovery well, but I think your passion came through very well in that Canopy course. And it was kind of like you were there with us in the sky when we were doing our drills, just because you talked so passionately about Canopy work. Anyway, my question was, what do you recommend for someone trying to kind of dip their feet into high performance work with canopies?
I think the biggest thing is, I'd say two things, really. The biggest thing is max out every parachute that you have. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're 220, but get to a parachute that you're comfortable with, that you're good on, and then max it out. Do your skills, do your drills. Like, don't just fly your parachute to land safely. On every jump, there should be some sort of goal. Whether it's just to like practice a flat turn, or get a little bit closer to your accuracy, or remember where your setup points were. Just always have a goal on every jump. We planted skydive, like, through and through. We plan our free fall from exit to opening, but sometimes that's all we do is plan that free fall, and then we just want to land safely. And you're really not doing yourself any favors by not, like, having some sort of goal under Canopy all the time. So then max out your parachutes and then continue. Like I say that, I'm like, you really want to, like, stay on a parachute and get to know it, but then at the same time, don't get stuck on it. Like, keep continuing to have a slow, safe, like, good progression. So if you're feeling like you're out of goals, then don't be afraid to advance in your Canopy. That may not be downsizing, but it might be switching to a more aggressive planform or something.
Is that something you're looking to do, Alina? Are you hoping to go down that road?
Oh, 100%. All of my friends know I don't stop talking about canopies. So that's kind of what I would love to do with the sport, is get into Canopy work at some point. And Allison was my first Canopy instructor. She still is.
Perfect. And Allison, just, I mean, on the subject of high performance Canopy piloting as it exists right now, it's interesting to me. I feel like over the last 5 or 10 years, probably, the advancement in Canopy piloting has come from the parachutes. And now we're in this slightly new era where the advancement is coming in the containers and the harness. And that's really, really interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
It's getting scary. It's getting cool, man. It's so cool. I love watching the sport progress this fast. Like, it's so exciting for me, but it's also, I'm legit afraid that for my friends and like brothers and sisters in the sky, I just want everybody to be safe, but I also, just like anything, you gotta let it progress, and watching the progression is so exciting.
Yeah, I feel the same. I've been watching, obviously, I was able to watch it firsthand, the World Championships in Skydive Arizona, and watching the room margin for error do that on the mutants, to the point where it is so fast and the reactions have to be so fast, and they're so close to the limits of what's feasible in the current competition standards that we have. Are we at the point where the performance and the equipment is out progressing the courses and the rules?
The courses and the rules, I personally think no, not yet. I mean, I think that these guys are handling it, and I think it was very interesting, like watching some of the nationals, just watching some people struggle with the conditions. But I also think, I don't think changing, I don't know. I guess, are you asking, like, should we be changing the rules for the mutant?
Well, I know that in the equipment, whether it's harness and parachutes, there's been lots and lots of progression and innovation, whereas the rules are just trying to make it safe. Well, maybe that's time for a complete overhaul.
Yeah,
that would be interesting. I'm all for innovation, but I'm also all for new ideas, you know.
yeah. I don't know. I kind of want to just,
We'll see.
I mean, I want to be a part of it, and I want to continue. I'm constantly working towards, like, making parachutes that we are, like, Performance Designs is constantly working towards making parachutes that are going to be more efficient with the mutant as well. But I think it's not, like, I think we're just, like, we're on a brink of an era with
Yeah,
it.
I agree. Talking of innovation and new things coming up, Lauren, why don't you hop on and ask your question to Allison? Where are you, Lauren? There she is. That's all right.
I have a guest appearance in here as well.
Patrick.
Patrick and I want to ask Allison together. It seems like you've dealt yourself, a pretty good handful of cards. And I know that, probably your goal right now is coming back stronger and even better from this last injury. But what's next? Patrick wants to know, what are your goals?
Oh, man.
Meet Patrick.
Yeah, exactly. To keep up with you, man.
She's coming for you.
I hope so.
Right now, I'm pretty stoked on, like, just the team is amazing, and what I think is gonna come out of this is pretty crazy, and I'm just trying to juggle right now and keep up. For the most part.
You're killing it.
You're doing an awesome job.
Thanks.
And I mean, that's one of the exciting things about what you're doing, Allison, is you're on the cutting edge of that, with your work as a project lead for the Peregrine and the Valkyrie. Do you want to give us a little something about what's coming next?
Nope. No.
Oh, come on, just a little something, maybe.
I mean, we just released a new Peregrine this summer, which is a new material, which we believe is faster and stronger, which I think will open up some options for us to make better Peregrines and just continue that development. And that's kind of the focus right now, as far as for the high performance side of it. Just work on I think we have a great wing. I think it has a lot of ways we can make it better, and also as these new and different harnesses are, like, we're just learning more and more about them, and we'll figure out what exactly is needed out of the parachute.
Yeah. So I guess, because we're coming up to the end of our hour now already, and it's been really.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
How are people still going faster in speed skydiving? Speaking of innovation.
Well, we haven't actually. No one's reached terminal velocity yet.
How do you know?
because we're still accelerating through the window of the scoring window. So just in very briefly, we exit and we have 7,400 feet of altitude in which to try and go as fast as possible. And when we get to the bottom of that 7,400, we can see in the fly sites people are still accelerating. So to the extent that we haven't reached terminal velocity, we're going to go faster.
Got it. So
And
it's just about getting faster quicker.
yeah, how to accelerate faster, if that makes sense. So yeah,
got it.
It's a very exciting discipline. It's not new, it's been around for quite some time, but it's really just beginning to take off in the US, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So like everything, innovation is key. Innovation is amazing, and we just continue to push forward to see what's possible, you know. And in that vein, I'm going to ask you a sort of a wrap-up question as we come to the end of the hour. I mean, you've been in skydiving, like I said, half your life, and I know you're going to be in it for a lot more of the rest of your life, no doubt. Is there any sort of message that what has skydiving taught you, or what lessons have come out of it for you that really stand out, that keep you inspired and moving forward?
Don't sit under a tree with coconuts. No.
That's really good advice, but you know.
No, I don't know. I think it's giving me my life. It's giving me everything. This is such a beautiful sport, and it has the most amazing people and the coolest stuff. And it's just like you said, there's innovation and everything's new, and I'd be lost without it. So as far as what it's giving me, it's amazing. And I think really my progression personally has just taught me to mind's eye stuff and just you can blindly pick a goal, and if you just continue to just work for it, it'll probably eventually work out, you know.
And that's definitely the way I feel. Like I love hearing you talk about skydiving, because your passion and your authenticity and your enthusiasm for it just exudes, you know what I mean? And it's just wonderful to be around. And this has been great, not only to hear, but I know how much I've heard a lot of your story, and I'm just so excited that we were able to share it with everybody else. So thank you, Allison, for being an awesome, yeah, exactly. It was like, ding, 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 ding. And it's so nice to be the one asking the questions. If you don't know Allison well, she's like the Spanish Inquisition. I'm just saying, all the questions. So it's such a joy for me to be on the other side. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks everybody for coming along. It's so nice to see everybody's faces and to see you taking part, even people from Germany. I see Laura Golly at the bottom. You guys are all welcome. Please come and join us for the next one. And you guys are awesome. Thank you very much to Melissa as well. And this will be going up on YouTube. Feel free to share it with your friends. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Allison. You say goodbye.